So here's why meal plans don't work and what you need to do instead if you want to lose weight. So you're here because you're searching for a meal plan to help you lose weight. Maybe you got hooked in by my little title and you were intrigued. And possibly you believe meal plans are the answer to your fat loss woes. But I'm here to tell you they suck. And they suck hard. But I'm not going to leave you in the lurch. I am going to give you an alternative, a different way to approach dieting that will help you sculpt a leaner, healthier, stronger body for good. And if you're interested in hearing more, then let's crack on. Now, here's what you're going to find out. You're going to find out the 6 reasons why most meal plans fail. I'm also going to tell you the exception to that rule where meal plans might actually have some benefit. And then, because of the nice guy that I am, I'm going to give you 5 top tips for successful dieting without a meal plan. Cool. So if you're ready, let's get straight into it. So the first question we want to answer is, are meal plans essential for a diet to work? So when you think about dieting, you might straight away think about meal plans. You want someone to tell you exactly what to eat and when to eat it so you don't have to think. Am I right? Sadly, that's probably where you're going wrong, because a prescribed meal plan is probably the last thing you need right now. Think about it this way. If I told you what to eat every day for the next 90 days, you might think that would be fucking awesome. Simon, sign me up right now. I just want to follow what you tell me. But here's the thing. First of all, only a registered dietitian can actually prescribe you what you should eat. No trainer, nutritionist can do that legally. So all we can provide is recommendations, guidelines. No one can say you should eat this every single day. Not possible unless you're trying to bend the rules a little bit. Now, also, let's say you do get this plan that does say what you should eat over the course of the next 90 days. What then happens, project forward for me, what happens after 90 days when you're on your own? The program's finished, your coaching program has finished. What happens then? Are you going to follow the same plan again? What happens if your goals change and that plan now doesn't fit? Are you going to go and get another plan and then another plan and then another plan? Are you going to use this sort of coaching process as some sort of crutch for the rest of your life? Now, that might be the way some online coaches work, but not me. Now, if I set my business up to act as this crutch for you, then to me, my shit is broken. You see, you don't need a bunch of meal plans to follow like a fucking droid. You're not the Terminator. So wouldn't it be more powerful for you to learn about nutrition so you could lose weight, get the results you want, and more importantly, maintain them on your own? Of course it fucking would. So meal plans are certainly not essential for a diet to work. In fact, 9 times out of 10, they suck. Okay, I made that statistic up, but I bet I'm fucking right. And let me tell you why. So this is why meal plans generally don't work in the long run. Now, although commonplace in the fitness industry, meal plans rarely fucking work. And the reason for the high failure rate can be attributed to a number of factors, including the fact that they're often generic, cookie cutter plans, copy and paste the same program for everyone. No thought whatsoever into your personal circumstances, your lifestyle, what foods you like, what foods you hate. It's just eat fucking chicken, broccoli, and rice 4 times a day, and fuck you if you want to eat something exciting. There's also limited food choices and plenty of restriction, which I've just gone into right there, but it's just confounding that point further. Now, they're also ill-conceived and potentially promoting deficiencies. So really, you should really understand that a meal plan should really look at nutrient content. It should look at fiber. It should look at, are you getting the recommended daily allowance of all the various different vitamins and minerals? Is chicken, broccoli, and rice 4 times a day going to hit that mark? Probably not. You're going to need some variety. You need to understand how you can get that variety into your diet, still hit your calorie target, get the nutrients you need, and progress towards your goal. A meal plan is actually quite a complicated thing to pull together. So a cookie cutter version probably isn't going to cut it. It's also the fact that these plans are just set up for a short-term fix, and they're actually used long-term. So really a meal plan can be useful if you are someone who, let's say you're focused on a really specific short-term goal. You need to achieve a certain amount of weight loss in 4 weeks or 8 weeks or whatever it is. You might say, well, okay, I'm going to get a couple of really basic meal plans and I'm just going to cover that for a short period of time. That's perfectly fine if it suits you. But the issue comes is when someone grabs these short-term plans and actually applies them for the long term. That's where issues can come in. The other thing is that there's a lack of nutrition education and support to sustain any changes. So anybody can write you a plan that says, eat fucking some meat, eat some vegetables, eat a bit of carbs, and do that 3-4 times a day. Any motherfucker can do that. That's not hard. The difficult bit is you've got to coach someone through this process. So over the course of 90 days, if you're not getting taught about calories, what matters in terms of minimum amounts of fat, or what you can do with carb and fat ratios, how to manage eating out, supplementation, all of these different sorts of things. If you're not taught this, when that comes to an end and eventually you say, fuck it, I cannot follow this meal plan any longer, you haven't got any nutritional background, any nutritional education to be able to sustain any sort of change. And if any of you have been on a yo-yo dieting experience, this is why it happens. The other thing is it promotes this failure and a fuck it mindset if you stray off plan. Because this thing is so restrictive and you haven't been given any knowledge to say, well, what happens if this happens? Or what happens if I go out? Or what happens if I go on a date? Or what happens if I've got a social event or I want to go out for a few beers? What do I do? The plan doesn't account for that. So you just think, oh, fuck it, it's not on the plan. So I'll just go balls out, balls deep, and then whatever will be, will be. Now, all things considered, I'm not a huge fan of your average meal plan, as you might have been able to tell, but they do serve a purpose. Now, after slating meal plans for the last however long of this particular episode, I'm now going to throw a spanner in the works by saying that sometimes they do actually serve a purpose, but it's a specific circumstance. It's in the right situation with the right approach, and with a well-constructed meal plan, they can help you on the road to being leaner, healthier, and basically more sexy as fuck. You see, a good plan can be a great guide on how to eat well. So it shows you how to construct a highly nutritious diet and helps you achieve your calorie goal. Now, the same plan can be an example of how to incorporate the foods you love on a daily basis without disrupting your entire life. And this can be really good when you're first starting out. Instead of being thrown into the deep and left to drown, you've got something to try and guide you. But those meal plans need to be supported by education and long-term habit change. Otherwise, you'll be in the realms of eating the same thing for the rest of your fucking life. And who the fuck wants to do that? So meal plans on their own are pretty shit. But combine an awesome meal plan with education, support, and you might be onto a winner. And that's how I set things up with my clients at I Am Paradise Fitness. So when they join the program, I understand about their lifestyle. There's a big ass questionnaire that they fill out telling me all about their lifestyle, the foods they love, the foods they hate, what their work patterns like, when they work out, all these different sorts of things thrown into the mix. Then I sit there and I create 2 meal plans, 2 sample meal plans for a guide of how they can hit the calorie number that they need using the foods they love, working it around their lifestyle and making that completely nutritious. But I then support that with a whole bunch of education. I support it with coaching, with guiding them through the right process to be able to make a good diet stick around for the long term. And that's the important thing. So if a prescriptive cookie cutter meal plan is not the way to go, what should you be doing instead? Now that's a good question. And I certainly don't want to leave you on that fat loss ledge. So here's 5 recommendations of what you should be doing instead if meal plans you feel are currently the answer. Number one, what you should do is track what you eat right now and make small changes, because you don't need to overhaul your entire diet to lose weight. In fact, there's probably a solid argument for doing things a little bit slower, especially if you're someone who's fallen into that yo-yo dieting trap in the past. So instead of doing a complete 180-degree turn and trying to make 101 different changes, make changes a step at a time. Think about changing one meal before you move on to the next. So for example, how could you change your breakfast so that it's maybe a little bit more nutritious? Maybe a little less calorie dense if it's very calorie dense right now. What sort of foods can you change so maybe it's a bit more high in protein so you feel a little bit more full for longer? Trying to blunt those hunger feelings. What small changes can you make to one meal that you can stick to? Then make that change. Then make it stick. Then move on to the next one. That's how you're going to build up sustainable change. Number two, I suggest address the low-hanging fruit. Now, low-hanging fruit was a fucking phrase I despised when I worked in an office, but it has some application here, and plus it mentions fruit, so that's kind of nutritionally. Now, you are not an idiot. You are listening to this podcast, which makes you smarter than the average human, in my opinion. And you've made it this far through this particular episode, so I'm guessing that you have a certain level of intelligence. However, you probably know in your heart of hearts what's good food, not necessarily good food, that's a bad phrase. Bad for you, Simon. That is a bad phrase to use. You probably know what foods are taking you out of a calorie deficit. You probably know what foods are taking you off track. So whether you make a call to the Chinese takeaway every fucking day or you bring 6 donuts to work for lunch, you probably know that they are the things that are taking you out of a calorie deficit. You may be drinking a lot. You may be having takeaway 5 times a week. Whatever it is, you probably in your heart of hearts know what things are really making it difficult for you to stick to a calorie deficit. So the first thing first would be to tackle those. So that's not to say that you have to cut everything out, but it might say, okay, well, we're not going to have 5 takeaways a week, we're going to have 1. We're not going to go out and have 35 beers over the course of the weekend. I'm going to stick to 5. Whatever it may be, is you're tackling some of that low-hanging fruit that's really, really easy to change. Number 3, you want to use some form of tracking or non-tracking method that suits you most. So most of the time, tracking is always the default approach to losing weight these days. So if you want to get into a calorie deficit, you feel like you're going to need to count calories. So MyFitnessPal becomes the first app that you download and you crack on with it like that. But I want you to remember that even though calories count, you don't have to count calories in order to lose weight, because there are a bunch of non-tracking methods that actually work, that are less obsessive, less time consuming. And if you feel like tracking is simply a hassle, some of these alternatives will work well. So you've got, for example, intermittent fasting. You've got low carb, doesn't have to be full on keto. You've got low fat, you've got meal skipping. It's a bit like intermittent fasting, but you don't have the specific rules around it. And you've just got like meal replacement shakes, so you could replace a meal with a protein shake. That's bound to, in most cases, reduce the calorie content of that meal. Now, there are some cons associated with non-tracking methods. So for example, they're likely to be more restrictive. Because you aren't tracking, you haven't therefore got the degree of flexibility. You are just cutting out certain food groups or food types or skipping meals altogether. And that therefore can add a level of restriction. But you've got to make that judgment call between, am I happy to have less flexibility but have an easier process? Or do you want to have a slightly more complex process like calorie counting to give you the full flexibility that you want? You have to make that decision. Now, number 4 is plan ahead and do some meal prep if it helps. So to me, planning is an often overlooked part of the fat loss puzzle. Thinking about that week ahead, developing a plan for what might happen, everything related to your nutrition reduces the guesswork that might happen. So you're less likely to be caught off guard and left grabbing whatever you can lay your hands on. Now, if you throw in some meal prep on top of that, instantly you've made navigating your way through the week a little bit easier. Now, you should also say, well, maybe you may be worried about repetition, like getting bored with various different meals if you do meal prep. Again, that becomes down to a personal choice. You can prep as much as you want. You can prep like 6 different dishes a week if you want to, but you just got to have a trade-off. That means more time in the kitchen that you've got to prepare that food. You could say, well, I'm happy to have the same thing multiple days in a row because it means I have to make less decisions about food, less thought process about, does this fit, does that fit? All of that can get quite tiresome and wear you down. So eating the same thing reduces something called decision fatigue, which can be a good thing. So again, comes down to personal preference. How much variety do you want versus how much effort you're going to have to put in to get that variety? You've got to make that decision. But planning ahead in general is going to help you navigate through. Number 5 is make long-term decisions. So at this point, I could talk about the whole thing of getting someone to help you do all of this would be a smart option. Now, had I chosen to do that, I would obviously have talked about the process of losing weight and getting in shape being very, very daunting, and how implementing the handful of simple tips I've just given you might still feel overwhelming. And if I'd gone down that route, I might well have mentioned that I Am Paradise Fitness online coaching can take all of that stress away. But we're friends here and you're a clever old soul, so you'd have seen right through that. Am I right? So here's what I've got for you instead for number 5. So top tip number 5 is about thinking long term. So every decision you make along the way should be with a review of creating a way of eating that you can sustain. Resist the temptation to opt for the quick fix because it almost never works. And if long term involves online coaching, then I'm confident you know what to do. But when you're thinking about what you should eat, when you're thinking about what approach you should take, think about, can I sustain it for the long term? And I mentioned before about how meal plans work with I Am Paradise Fitness. If you want to go and have a look at the results that are achieved through that, then click the link in the notes and that'll take you. You can go have a look for yourself. So what's the bottom line on meal plans then? So here it is. Most meal plans suck harder than a toothless hooker in Amsterdam. And now I've got no personal experience of that, let me tell you that. And they serve no real benefit in the long run. In the main, they're generic, poorly thought through, and simply designed to make you feel comforted by the fact you have something to follow. But they rarely work. Generally, meal plans offer a short-term solution to problems requiring a long-term approach. Essentially, they're the wrong tool for the job, like trying to smash down a wall with a pencil. You might chip away at the surface, but you won't make a dent in the real task at hand. Having said all of that though, meal plans do serve some use when used in the right way. If your goal is a short-term one, i.e. just a few weeks, then a meal plan could be a perfectly valid solution. Additionally, if you haven't got a clue about nutrition and don't know where to start, meal plans can offer you some initial guidance, but they need to be well thought through and specific to you, because if they aren't, you're not learning anything and you'll be back at fat loss square one before you can say, fucking hell, this plan is boring. So think less about a predetermined meal plan. Follow the 5 steps I've laid out for you and apply them consistently. Okay, it might require a little more effort, but if you want to live a leaner, healthier life for good, you're going to have to put in some work somewhere. And if you go down the route of meal plans, make sure they're bespoke to you. Cover all of those nutrition requirements and they're full of the foods you love. And better still, get the support and education you need along the way to make those habits stick. So hopefully you've enjoyed this episode of the show. If you have, please come and visit me on Instagram and tell me what you think and just say hi. My username is at iron_paradise_fitness. But for now, all I'll say is keep living the lean life. Thanks very much for listening, and I'll see you for the next one.